This was supposed to be simple.
Twilis thought to himself. If he was speaking, it would have been grumbling.
All we needed to do was an errand for the Turaga. 3 days of walking, and we should have been back home safely without any trouble.
Yet trouble is what Twilis and his allies were doing with now. And at this moment, a small silver and grey bomb, approximately the size of a thorn axe but without the spikes, fell from the sky and bounced next to his right foot. Cursing to himself, Twilis rolled out of the way as the bomb went off, causing scorched chunks of rock to scatter all around the mountain path. As Twilis rose to his feet, his face reflected the stern warrior he was, concentrating on the task ahead. His body was covered with silver and white armor, the former being a color uncommon for a toe of light. Rather than giving a warm, powerful aura that gold would have given him, the silver reflected a stone-cold appearance thanks to the white armor that came with it. The only sign of life from the Toa was his fierce, narrowed yellow eyes peering from his pale mask, the Knoe Trina. He carried a silver saber in his right hand, reflecting the light from the sunset in the distance. The Toa looked around at his comrades, who were fighting their own battles, all of which revolved around a band of thieves. They had just popped out of the rocks while the Toa were walking down the tan and gray path near Turturo Mountain, as if these thieves were waiting to pounce on these specific Toa. This had surprised them, but Twilis was more annoyed than anything else. At the very least, the Toa could use the exercise fighting these goons. Besides, Twilis was getting tired of Kratos' constant blabbering.
"Hit them with all you've got, men!"
Twilis shouted. His voice was commanding, but also cold, reflecting his visage as if any slight disobedience from his comrades would result in punishment.
"We won't back down!"
A Toa of air several yards away called out to Twilis.
"You know I won't."
His voice was lighter and friendlier than that of his commander. He tried to sound confident, but really just wanted to survive the encounter, both from the thieves and Twilis. But still, he was getting bored of walking, so this battle was a nice change of pace. This Toa, Vankus, wore a green Knoe Miru, and his armor contained various shades of green, mostly forest and lime, his silver chestplate being the only thing that broke up his color scheme. He had a small jetpack-like device on his back, which included 2 silver wings. There appeared to be an emerald energy radiating from the top of these wings, as if the Toa could take off whenever he wanted to. Vankus pulled a Kanoka disc from his brown leather pouch hanging from his waist and pushed it into a Kanoka disc launcher. It was larger than most Kanoka disc launchers, like a shotgun compared to a pistol. His launcher had a forest green top, a silver underbelly, and a translucent lime green body, radiating with energy, as if the contents were ready to combust after the shot. With a grin on his face, Vankus aimed his launcher upward, and with a green flash of light, fired the disc. However, his target Turbo zipped out of the way, only a second before the disc could hit him. Not even 1 second, it appeared to be less than that.
"Too slow,"
the creature cackled. At least, that's what Vankus thought he had said. Turbo spoke very swiftly with a slight, raspy accent, almost as if he was having difficulty breathing with how fast he was going. This made it difficult to understand what he was saying, as his words matched his high speed. He wore silver and grey armor and carried a curved blade in each hand, Vankus' body reflecting off of each side of the blades. Around Turbo's waist was a black belt with several of the small bombs, just in reach for the creature to drop them upon the Toa and let them explode into tiny pieces. Turbo's flat head was covered by a silver curved helmet, revealing only his toothy grin and slanted red eyes that held a look of murderous pleasure. He had an extremely thin and lanky body, contrasting against the enormous jetpack on his back, which was approximately the same size as him, and appeared to be powered by a massive wind turbine. It was a surprise that the power of the turbine didn't blow Turbo away from it. At the very least, it answered why Turbo remained in the air. The jetpack could have crushed the creature's spine from its size and weight. Vankus growled as he loaded another disc and fired once more. This did not faze his flying adversary as Turbo sped out of the way of the blast like a bullet, so fast that he stopped 50 yards away from his original spot in a millisecond.
"Ah!"
Turbo taunted. He appeared to enjoy annoying his opponent, like a flame wasp in a Goron picnic. He sped away as another blast missed him, continuing to fly down the mountain path. He looked down at the Toa, who looked like a rock ant in comparison, when in actuality the Toa was several inches taller.
"Catch me if you oomph!"
The creature's taunting and flying came to a stop as he crashed into a stone-hard wall, his body becoming limp. The wall was several feet thick and wasn't connected to the mountain, instead jutting from the ground like a tan monolith. Turbo slowly slid off the wall before tumbling towards the ground. As he began to feel his limbs again, he caught glimpses of another Toa. This one had brown and gray armor, clearly the Toa of Stone, and wore a brown Knoe Kakama. He was much more physically built than the other Toa, almost like the mountain they were fighting next to. His chest was twice the size of his head, his arms and legs were as thick as tree trunks, and his hands were as large as small boulders. He held a large hammer, nearly the same size as himself, hefted upon his right shoulder. His orange eyes narrowed as the creature plummeted further and further down.
"Oh, we can,"
Latoa, Poldrin, muttered. Almost like a gentle giant, his voice was calm, yet deep and strong. He lowered his hammer to the side with both of his hands. As Turbo nearly reached the ground, Poldrin swung his hammer counterclockwise, slamming into the creature's chest and causing Turbo to crash into the stone wall, breaking it into 2 large pieces. Turbo kept flying until he hit the side of a mountain, which finally halted his trajectory. Turbo slowly collapsed from the mountainside, leaving a nice dent in the shape of his body, although it looked more like a decapitated marsh duck. Poldrin gave a small chuckle at the sight. Elsewhere, 2 blades clashed over and over with each other. One had a silver curved handle with an orange sword shaped like a flame. The other was silver and jagged, as if it had been used in battle multiple times and was showing its age. The first blade was owned by Kratos, a Toa of fire, clad in red and orange armor, looking like the fiery sun. Underneath his red and orange Kanohi Arthron was a smile of glee, as if he was having fun swinging his sword and hopping back and forth between the rocks like a gleeful Gorn after receiving a present. His opponent, Saber, was much different, with a concentrated, stern look on his reptilian, toothy face. He was a Skakti of air, with green and silver armor covering his body, with the appearance of a scaly soldier. He sidestepped away from Kratos' blade over and over, all the while his crimson eyes never gazed away from the Toa's body, as if the Skakti was studying his movements. Kratos finally jumped upwards, both hands on his sword, ready to bring it down on his foe, but Saber blocked it with his own blade before pushing his opponent's weapon away with said blade.
"I'm surprised you're not out of practice, hero,"
Saber growled. His voice was calm, yet slightly monstrous at the same time, as if he could erupt into a furious rage if he was pushed too far.
"In so-called peaceful times such as these, there's not much to fight against."
Kratos didn't seem to be fazed by the statement. If anything, he seemed amused that the Skakti would say such a thing.
"Well, let's see."
He swung his sword 360 degrees clockwise as Saber blocked the blow, pushing the Skakti backwards a few inches from the force. Kratos continued talking in a slight condescending tone as the two continued their battle, like a champion bragging about his accomplishments.
"There are Vorax in the desert, the occasional Rahi attack, and the fact that I'm one of the best Toa out there."
As Saber swung his sword downward towards the Toa's head, Kratos spun around in the opposite direction. As Kratos raised his left fist, it burst into flame and he punched Saber in the back.
"Ah!"
The Skakti cried out, wincing his pain as he fell to his knees. It had felt like a flaming rock that someone had thrown at him. Saber's armor had protected him, but the burning fist did cause the armor to melt a bit in the center of his back. Twilight had seen Kratos' feet, but didn't appear to be impressed. In fact, he appeared to be annoyed, glaring at Kratos like an angry teacher.
"Stop praising yourself.
He scolded.
Focus on the task at hand."
As soon as he spoke, Twilight turned his head towards the right, hearing a harsh, sharp hissing sound, like 2 rocks sliding against one another. From behind one of the rocks, an iron serpent, a snake-like creature covered in shiny metallic armor, popped out and lunged at Twilight, its silver fangs glistening in the sunlight. Before it could take a bite out of Twilight, though, the Toa fired a white beam of light from his left hand, hitting the snake square into the jaw, causing it to recoil in pain and to fall to the ground. Not hesitating for a single moment, Twilight kicked it out of the way before it could recover, causing it to crash into a large boulder, cracking the rock. Twilight then heard a shrill screech coming from above, followed by a stench of death. The Toa tilted his head upward before ducking as a bone vulture zoomed past his head before flying back upward, failing to catch or even scratch him with his claws. The bone vulture was covered with black feathers, but portions of its feathers seemed to have fallen off of his body, revealing a skeletal interior. This included its curved horns, wings, legs, and tail, which were completely bare and almost blade-like. After realizing that it grabbed nothing, the bone vulture turned around and screeched, sounding like a high-pitched Goron, and dived again. However, it only flew a few feet before a sun-blasted water hit the left side of its body, pushing it backwards as it screeched until it crashed into the side of the mountain. Twilight noticed this and turned towards where the water came from.
"Thankfully, there are some who pay attention in combat."
He nodded towards Tamina, his stern countenance never wavering. The Toa of Water gave a slight frown.
"I assume that's a thank you,"
she sighed. She was used to Twilight's cold tone of voice by now. Her armor was various shades of blue, mostly sky and navy. She wore lightweight armor, complementing her slim but powerful frame, and wore a blue Kanohi grown over her face. In her right hand, she carried a blue and silver staff covered with several sharp hooks. She heard a small whoosh behind her and turned around, noticing that a vortex had landed behind her. The Vortex trainer wore black and blue armor with a silver breastplate, emphasizing her decently sized chest. Her head was dark blue, with blood-red, angry eyes and a short black ponytail flowing through the wind. With a mighty cry, she swung a silver whip at Tamina. Reacting quickly, the Toa caught the whip with one of her hooks.
You hurt my pets.
Trainer hissed, her voice cold and venomous, perfect for a vortex. As the vortex ended her statement, Tamina screamed in pain as a powerful electrical current flowed through Trainer's whip, traveling towards Tamina and shocking her. It felt like 1,000 volts, which could fry a normal being's nervous systems.
So this will be satisfying.
Trainer grinned. That grin left her face as she felt a heated fist slam into her stomach, sending her tumbling a few feet away from where she once stood. Trainer gasped for breath as she lay dazed and in pain, a combination the vortex did not feel comfortable with. Tamina, now free from the whip, fell on one knee, trying to recover from the shock. She looked upward, her vision becoming less blurry as Kratos walked by her, giving a small wink at her, making Tamina both happy and annoyed at the same time. He always wanted her attention, but Tamina was just fine being friends. Kratos seemed to want more than that, though. Thankfully, his focus, at least most of it, was on the vortex.
Well, your pets are trying to kill us, so I think we have every right to hurt them.
Kratos noted, a statement with some cockiness and a bit of annoyance. As he neared Trainer, who appeared to be regaining her breath, Kratos swung his blade, but Trainer rolled out of the way, finally getting to her feet.
Well, you have no right to hit a woman.
She hissed, snapping her whip to the ground, sounding like a small thunderclap. At this sound, the Bone Vulture and Iron Serpent came to each side of the vortex, baring their claws and teeth respectively, ready for combat. Kratos smirked, not impressed with the sight.
The women I like don't try to kill me.
Turned towards Tamina at the last part. Tamina, now back on her feet, gave a small groan as she walked over to help her fellow Toa. Kratos turned back towards Trainer, his blade raised to confront her.
And now, oof!
Before he could finish speaking, Turbo slammed into Kratos like a cannonball and carried him up into the air.
Now we rip you to shreds and feed your carcass to the Vorax.
Turbo sneered at the Toa of Fire, flying him through the air as they rose higher and higher.
What?
Kratos called out. The creature's swift speaking patterns, combined with the rush of the wind, made it difficult to hear, confusing the Toa. Before Turbo could reply, a small gust of wind pushed him away to the side.
No.
With a sudden change in trajectory, it caused the creature to drop Kratos. While the Toa now was free from Turbo's grasp, he was now plummeting towards the ground.
Ah!
Kratos screamed, actually terrified. It wasn't long before his screams were answered and a green blur flew near him and grabbed his waist.
Oof!
The sudden jolt caused his breath to be knocked out of Kratos. Coughing as he tried to regain his breath, he turned his head backwards toward Venkus, who was holding Kratos in his arms, wincing from Kratos' weight. The Toa of Fire wasn't that heavy, but Venkus wasn't used to lifting his fellow Toa.
A little gentler next time, brother?
Kratos smirked.
If that's possible?
You're welcome.
Venkus replied in a sarcastic but weak tone, still straining from the weight.
I do appreciate your gratefulness.
It appeared he was more concerned with setting the Toa of Fire down on the ground rather than arguing. Back on the ground, it was Poltron's turn to deal with Saber. The Toa of Stone swung his hammer vertically towards the ground. Saber, at the last minute, rolled out of the way as the hammer slammed into the ground. The slam was powerful enough to momentarily shake the earth and even causing a few pebbles to burst from the hammer's impact, where a small crater now laid. Poltron heaved his hammer off the ground and blocked Saber's sword swing. Poltron pushed his opponent's blade out of the way and concentrated his mask, the Mask of Speed, glowed with a tannish brown energy. Saber swung his blade again, but Poltron zipped forward in one swift movement, as fast as a dune buggy, pinning him into the mountainside. With his opponent dazed, Poltron backed up and swung his mallet. Saber, finally coming to his senses, ducked the mallet and slid underneath Poltron's legs, feet first. As he was sliding, the Skakti rose up and slashed Poltron upwards across the back.
Oh!
Poltron screamed as he staggered. He swung his hammer behind him, but Saber dodged the weapon. Poltron's mask glowed again and he zipped forward, but Saber, ready this time, sidestepped before the Toa's large frame could slam into him again. Poltron managed to come to a stop, sliding across the ground until he stopped a few feet away from a large boulder. Saber then turned towards his opponent, ready to follow after him, but a searing blast of fire hit his back.
Ugh!
The Skakti shouted as he fell to the ground face first. Shaking the dust from his face, Saber tried getting up, but he felt a heated push him back down, causing him to wince in pain as the Toa of Fire stood triumphant.
You might as well surrender now.
Kratos smirked, his sword pointed at Saber and his left fist firm on his hip.
We've pretty much won.
Sure enough, Venkus had his blaster aimed at Turbo, the Toa's disc starting to glow as if ready to fire. Turbo's jetpack seemed busted as he laid on the ground as the creature attempted to come to his senses. Twilis and Tamina had cornered Trainer next to the mountainside, surrounding the vortex and her creatures.
If you come with us quietly,
Twilis sternly told his opponent, his blade pointed towards her.
We won't have to hurt you or your pets, or any more than we already have.
Surprisingly, Trainer didn't appear to be intimidated in the slightest. Turbo rose his head and towards the vortex. She returned him a look and appeared to mount.
Do it already.
With this gesture, Turbo hit a large red button on the left side of his jetpack. As he slowly got to his knees, his jetpack caused him to rocket upward with tremendous force, almost like an explosion.
What in the world?
Exclaimed Vankus, falling onto his backside in shock. This action caught everyone's attention, their eyes following Turbo, who was screaming as he rose higher and higher until the Toa could barely see him.
Osmian!
Trainer shouted. Her bone vulture squawked in response and dove towards Twilis' leather knapsack, ripping it from the Toa's back with its claws. Twilis, noticing this, fired a ray of light at the bird, but a barrel rolled out of the way and dropped the knapsack into Trainer's clawed left hand, her face smiling in triumph.
Stop her!
Twilis shouted. He, Tamina, Vankus, and Poltron had started towards her, but Turbo crashed into the ground right in front of them, causing a large fiery explosion that caused the Toa to stumble backwards. Turbo muttered as he slowly rose back up. Oddly enough, other than a few bruises and burns on his armor, he appeared to be fine, as if he experienced this situation before. Either that, or he had extremely thick armor for such a scrawny being.
Tinker's gonna have a field day fixing this up.
True enough, Turbo's jetpack was extremely damaged, with smokes and sparks erupting from every side.
Shut your mouth.
Trainer muttered. She had put her whip onto her belt and pulled out a strange silver blaster from her backpack. It was smaller than Vankus' launcher, but appeared to be radiating a much stronger power.
Let's move.
She called out as she aimed a blaster towards the side of the mountain. A strange black and gray energy erupted from the tip of the blaster, and as soon as the blast reached contact with the wall, it slowly opened up a hole, a swirling black and gray vortex. Without hesitation, Trainer ran towards the hole and disappeared as she entered, her pets and comrades following behind her.
A portal!
Twilis realized, getting up to his feet.
Stop them!
He yelled.
I got it!
Vankus shouted, the only one who had completely recovered from the shock of a lunatic falling from the skies. Flying over the explosion and towards the hole, he flew closer and closer. As fast as he could, the portal began to close. Unfortunately, the hole closed up completely just as the Toa crashed into the wall where the hole was a second prior.
Ow!
He groaned as he slid down the wall and onto the floor, rubbing his forehead and chest in pain.
I hope I didn't crack anything.
Bolton quickly ran over to help his brother up.
Well, that was a disappointment.
Krause groaned, leaning his right arm on his sword, the tip poking into the ground.
I was starting to have a good time.
This statement was greeted by an eruption of water onto his face, powerful enough to cause him to stumble and fall into his rump. He looked up in surprise to see Tamina glaring at him, her yellow eyes flaring in anger. Admittedly, to Krause at least, she looked sort of cute when she was angry.
Kratos, this is serious. They got away. Those Koagorin won't be pleased.
Twilis glared at Kratos as well before lowering his head as if pondering about the situation.
But what did those thieves want from us?
Well,
Poltron replied as he put Vankus' left arm onto his shoulder, pulling him up.
they obviously wanted what was in your knapsack. Was the disc the only thing in there?
Twilis nodded.
Besides some auto fruit, but yes.
He turned to where their opponents had left. They couldn't go after them. That weapon had appeared to create a portal. The Toa didn't know where it took them, and they didn't seem to have any knowledge on how to find them. Twilis clenched his fists, frustrated at this failure. The Turaga really wouldn't be pleased.
I still don't understand why that disc was so special.
Vankus groaned, slowly regaining his senses.
Even the Agoran we picked it up from were very hush-hush about it.
We'll have to ask the Turaga when we get back.
Twilis answered.
They wanted that disc, and it's better not to lie about what happened.
While his voice was stern and understandably angry, there was a hint of worry in this statement, a feeling Twilis did not experience often. A Skakti, a Vortex, and some other creature. That was a strange combination for a simple group of thieves. There was something the Toa didn't know about, and he wanted to know what it was.